Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jenn Baljko, founder of Always On My Way and creator of the Fierce Awakened Woman Global Summit. This is a virtual gathering of the brave and gentle-hearted who are following their impulses for freedom, returning to the global village to share their unique gifts and inventing new ways forward for themselves and their communities. We are celebrating feminine grace and activating our courageous, grounded masculine so we can all be fierce, fun, and fantastic. Allow yourself to drop into this session with an open heart and an open mind. Feel into your sense of awareness, tap into your inner strength and wisdom, and get ready to leap into your enlightened, embodied, and expressive self as we connect and learn from others who have already sparked their joy journey. As you settle in and tune into what's present today, please join me in welcoming Ursula Martin. Let me tell you a little bit about Ursula. Ursula is a writer and a long distance walker, neither of which were ever in her career plan that she imagined as a child. She has spent the last 10 years traveling and learning, mostly about herself. Following an ovarian cancer diagnosis, she walked 3,700 miles, just about 6,000 kilometers, in Wales in 2014 and 2015. She wrote a book about that experience titled One Woman Walks Wales. She is currently 2 years into a solo 5,500-mile walk across Europe, from Ukraine to the UK. On a personal note, Ursula is my sister in walking boots. She is a fellow long distance walker living life literally one step at a time. I deeply admire her determination, her tenacity, and perseverance to keep showing up for herself and this walk. In normal situations, a walk like Ursula's takes a great amount of stamina. And in COVID times, I think it takes an extraordinary amount of patience and willingness to keep going while confronting doubt and vulnerability. Welcome, Ursula. So, welcome, Ursula.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here.
It's nice to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks. So, give us a little bit of your story. How did you've gone through some extraordinary things in your life, and how, take us back a little bit. I know you were kayaking before the diagnosis and traveling
Yeah.
quite a lot and already out in the world in a very fierce
hmm
way. And then
Mm.
you got hit with this diagnosis. So what happened? Like, how did this all come together for you?
Um, it's interesting because we've just been talking a little bit about your walk just before the interview, and you were kind of saying that you didn't really have a big reason why, a kind of life, huge, deep meaning to what you were doing, and it's actually the same for me. I had kind of gone traveling when I was about 28 or so, in that sense of not quite being happy with my life where it was. I was working in homeless hostels, and I was training to be a counsellor at that time, and I just kind of sensed that I wasn't really ready to be a counsellor, but I didn't really know what else I wanted to do at that time. And I ended up going traveling, that kind of air quotes, going off to with your rucksack and just having a good time. And I was just bumming around Europe, and I went to Spain, where my sister was living. I ended up being there for about 10 months and just having a good time, visiting beaches in Galicia and nice festivals and stuff, all that kind of stuff, not really with a big destination in mind. And I heard about this kayak journey. So I went back to the UK, saved up a little bit of money, and went off to kayak the length of the Danube, which
And that
again
was
was still just
1,700 miles
uh,
or something, right?
yeah. So do you know, I don't even know anymore. It's, yeah, something like that, about 3,000 kilometers from Ingolstadt. It was the length of the Danube from Ingolstadt in Germany down to the Black Sea. And then I did a little bit extra. This is why I'm fuzzy, because I did extra down through the Black Sea and around from Romania into Bulgaria. And I don't actually know how far that was. It took us about a week. And yeah, and all that was just very kind of disorganized isn't the word, but I just didn't have this big, huge focus about the project, which is kind of what I have now. And that has grown and grown because, yeah, basically then I got this ovarian cancer diagnosis while I was, I'd arrived in Bulgaria. I was going to stay there for the winter and then travel back to the UK by walking. But again, in a very unfocused way. And so what happened was I went back to the UK for Christmas and discovered that I had this cancer, and then everything changed, obviously. So since then, things have become kind of more. I just basically have done a series of projects since then. So after the cancer, I decided to walk in Wales, kind of as a symptoms awareness piece of charity fundraising. And I was walking to my hospital appointments because I still have to go to hospital to check that the cancer hasn't come back. And then from that, I wrote a book. And then from that, I just kind of thought that I'd walk across Europe. So yeah, the projects have both grown in size, but also grown in focus as well. So whereas, 10 years ago, I was in Spain and I actually did my first walk was in Spain, where I am now and where you are as well, Jen. And the River Minho in Galicia starts at the border between Spain and Portugal and then goes up. It's about 400 kilometers long. And that was the first river and the first thing that I saw on a map. And I thought, I could follow that river. And so that was the first kind of physical challenge journey that I did, was in Spain 10 years ago. And it's really, I mean, I had a map, literally it was half the size of a piece of A4 paper, showing the whole of Galicia, which is it's a huge region.
How did it fit on a small piece of paper like that, and how you could follow
it basically just had dots for cities and towns. It barely showed villages, and I used that as my that's where I'm going. And it was a real just follow your nose, make it up as you go along kind of thing. But I had a brilliant time. I had just had such a good time, and it was a month of walking. It was so memorable. And that was where I got that sense of possibility and discovery, that you could just go, and so the projects have just grown from there, really.
And I love that you started with this sense of possibility and just found a map somewhere and said,
Yeah,
I'm just gonna try it. Like what can happen, right? Like maybe I'll reach it, maybe I won't, whatever, right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
then to bring it back to this focus of like, I'm gonna walk to my hospital appointments. I heard that and I thought, wow, there's something about this woman, like that you're gonna do something in this kind of way, right? Like your reaction to kicking cancer to the curb was, I'm walking myself into that hospital around Wales, like, and telling people how to, because ovarian cancer is a very serious type of cancer, right? If you don't catch it early,
Yeah, that's right. It actually, at the time when I was diagnosed in Wales, in the UK generally, it had a 35% survival rate after 5 years, which has since improved. But at that time, it was just such a shock. And exactly as you say, it because it's quite often not diagnosed until much later in much more advanced stage, it's much more serious. Yeah. So that was a huge shock for me to do that. Yeah. And so that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to tell women about the symptoms, and I thought this is how I could do it. And the thing that started that idea was a river again, actually. So seeing that, the mountain that was very close to my house, about 6 miles away from my house, was the river, the mountain called Plinlimmon, and that 2 rivers came out of it, which did this huge journey through England and through Wales, and they'd met again at the mouth of the River Severn, which was really close to Bristol, which was where my hospital appointments were. So that's where it came from, was this idea I could walk down one river and go to hospital and go up the other river and go home. So I did it.
Yeah, but rivers for long distance walking, they're really good markers because people walked along rivers. This was a path through countries and villages, and then they built roads parallel to the river, and then they built railroads parallel to the river. We used rivers all the time as major markers for us, especially through Southeast Asia. Like we followed all the big rivers of Central and South, well, Southeast Asia more than that.
Right.
But when I knew that you were following rivers, I'm like, right, like, of course, that's a good starting point. They're eventually going to connect to a big town.
Yeah. You
and you
know
did
where
that
they're going to
alone,
go.
right? You did that alone too, right? You were by yourself with that.
The Welsh walk, yeah, I was. The first walk, it was about 6 months after my illness, and I did that. I just walked down to hospital and back up again, and that was really this. It was a very personal kind of. It was just an adventure, really, and it was just for me. And I didn't have big plans about the next walk, or I just wanted to walk to hospital and see what happened. And I was during that time, I kind of hitchhiked to hospital and I walked to hospital because I had all these appointments. I had appointments for the first year, I had to go to hospital every 3 months. And then the second year, I had to go every 4 months. So I took a bus and I hitchhiked. And then once I kayaked to hospital, which was so amazing. It was so brilliant because, again, the river, what can I do? I can kayak down it. So I borrowed a kayak from a friend. I got a different friend to take me to the river, and I just, set off, and it took me about a week. And that was just.
Like, well, you show up at the hospital and you have what your kayak.
I hitchhiked. I managed to hitchhike with the kayak from the side of the river right into the centre of Bristol, because these 2 glaziers, like these window repair guys, they tied the kayak onto the top of their van, and of course then they're not going to dump me on the edge of the city, so they're like, well, all right, we'll take her to a friend's house. So I turned up, and it just was this mad palaver every time I did it. But it was, I think because I've hitchhiked with a kayak before, actually. I hitchhiked across Germany with a kayak.
Your story gets more and more interesting.
I know, it's ridiculous, isn't it? It's all these
I hear something,
stupid.
and you did that too.
It's just because I think what you have to do is I'm a really big fan of, and this all came when I was in my early 20s, just living in Cardiff and working in an office. I was kind of logistics, examination administration for an international exam board. So just really boring, office logistics work. And I had all these friends in Cardiff, and we were 25, and we'd kind of go and smoke spliffs and break into the local park and stuff, and just all these things. And when you're that age, you have all these kind of surreal ideas. You go, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? And I realized that you can have an idea like that, and you can go, wouldn't it be brilliant if? And then it goes quiet and nobody does it. And actually you can do all these stupid things. You can hitchhike with a kayak across Germany. It's really difficult. It's a massive pain in the backside. I've hitchhiked across Germany without a kayak, and it took me 2 days. I hitchhiked across Germany with a kayak. It took me 5. But I did it. And I realized that the only sometimes the only commitment you have to make to achieve something is time and discomfort. And so that you get all these ways in which somebody would think, well, I'm not gonna hitchhike with a kayak across Germany. I'm gonna post it. Well, fine. If you want to pay like 200 euros to post that kayak across Germany, go for it. I didn't have 200 euros to do that. So that was my exchange, was my time and discomfort in place of other things. And so that's a really freeing kind of realization, is that you can do pretty much what, you know, saying that you can do anything you put your mind to is not realistic, but it's also kind of true, isn't it? Because you just have to commit time and discomfort, and that will get you a really long way.
I think,
And then, oh, sorry.
no, I was just going to say your point on time and commitment and discomfort is is spot on, because I think
Mm,
this is what holds us all back, right? Like, do I have the
yeah,
time? Okay, do I have the money? Do I have the time? Can I do it? And then when I first trained for my first marathon, way back when, my coach, I was doing a team in training, and the very first thing he said on day one is, get used to being uncomfortable. Like, we're going to be
yeah,
running in rain, we're going to be running uphill, we're going to be running in mud, we're going to be running. Get used to the discomfort. You know, dress for the weather and get used to the
yeah,
discomfort. And
yeah,
it's I thought about his words all the time, and just even doing this discomfort and breaking it down. I could do discomfort for 2 minutes. All right, 2 minutes. I
yeah,
could do it for 2 more minutes. I could do it for 3 more minutes. Right? It is a shift mentally that we have
yeah,
to make.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
But then, how did you jump into the second? Okay, so you did all this. You walked to the hospital. You hitchhiked with a kayak,
Yeah.
and then you wrote a book. And then you said, you know what? I'm just gonna go put myself in the Ukraine and walk to the UK. Where did that idea come from?
Yeah. Well, in a sense, it was because everything happened to me in such quick succession, from kind of being age 30 and traveling and not really thinking about anything, you know, just kayaking down the length of the Danube and hitchhiking across Europe, and everything's fine and you're fine and you're, you know, nothing serious has happened. And then suddenly it's cancer, and then you have this idea to walk, and then you write a book. But all those things just happen so quickly, relatively speaking. I kind of went from 2011 to 2016 without really thinking about the future or having an idea of what I was going to do next. It was just like bum, 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 all these things. So as I was coming towards the end of the first walk, there really was this sense of like, where was I? What was I doing before cancer suddenly, you know, changed everything? And I was like, oh, well, I was in Bulgaria. I was about to, because originally I'd kind of had this idea of kayak east and walk west. And I just knew that I really liked Bulgaria, and I was really interested in exploring Ukraine. So I just thought, well, all right, I'll walk across Europe. You know, and again, like you were saying earlier, there is no why. There just is. There's just the idea, and then there's the knowledge that you can do it if you put your mind to it. And so that's what I decided to do. And
And here you
and
are.
now, yeah. And I
Well,
don't always know why I'm doing it.
where
Sorry.
where are you now? 3,000 miles in, or are you?
I'm over 4,000,
Oh,
between 4 and 4,500. My step counter is not reliable anymore, unfortunately, and that was the thing that I was using to measure the distance. So I've just had to go vague with it, but that's fine. That's fine.
yeah.
It's
No,
somewhere around 4,500. Okay, it's probably getting on for 4,500 now.
right.
Yeah.
It's and you're in COVID times, so
Oh.
Do you want to, how are you managing all of these big and small decisions that you have to make, right? Because it's already extraordinary. Say, I'm going to pick up my backpack, I'm going to take a few years off, I'm going to go do this walk. It feels really
Mhm.
meaningful to me. I can't explain why I'm doing it to anybody else. Maybe other people may not understand it. It's what life is offering me, and I'm saying yes, right? That was my experience with our walk, and I hear it with you. But
Yeah,
now there's COVID, so you can go. I know you were in lockdown in France for a really long time, right? It's puts everything on hold. So how do you evaluate all these decisions right now and choose to keep pushing onwards and yeah, being fierce and awakened and vulnerable, right? Like this is a big lesson here too.
it I think in the immediate first, uh let's go back to a year ago when I was in Italy, walking across Italy last January, February, and then very suddenly Italy went into its first lockdown, and the whole world was very, very scared at that point. It just felt like, what do I need to do on the ground here in this immediate moment? So there wasn't this sense of I need to get home to safety, because nowhere was safe. And the idea of just making this, to me, I mean, it's only crossing Europe, but because I'd very much been in this, your kind of radius of possible distances when you're walking shrinks a lot. So you're in this radius of about 50 miles of where can I get to? Where's my possible? And then you're kind of thinking about a month ahead. So you're thinking about kind of 200 miles ahead. And so that the idea, and then you're in this, you're in the middle of a circle and you're moving across Europe. And the idea of breaking that and just going to England is just, it's impossible in a way. It
It
would
was,
take something major for me to consider that, and a pandemic wasn't major enough. Because and also there's the fact that I don't have a house back in the UK. I don't have a life waiting for me to slot back into. I'm not on holiday. I live where I am. And
right,
so there was no need to escape from where I was, because there was nothing to escape back to,
right.
you know?
You're in pilgrim mode, right? We've mentioned this. Like you're
Yeah.
really like in your own walk. Like you're right. There's no where are you going? Where are you going back to? Right there.
Yeah, exactly. There was no life waiting for me. Nothing was on hold back in the UK. It was everything I need to live exists with me in my journey. So I guess I've always just been dealing with it in the immediate moment. So, okay, can't move where I am, so I'll wait here. And when I can move, well, of course, that makes no sense to stop. And so I'll continue walking. So I walked from Italy into France, and had a lockdown for, ended up being 90 days in France. Then spent the summer walking from the Alps to the Pyrenees, and then across the length of the Pyrenees, in the mountains during September and October. And then there was another lockdown in France, and Spain was all in closed regions. And so I waited in France for another 50 days. Then I've been walking through Spain ever since, and I've actually just stopped again. So I'm on my third pause of the journey, just because where we are now is February, and basically after Christmas in Spain, the infection rates just shot up, and so there were more heavier restrictions were kind of brought in again. So, but the idea of giving up just hasn't. I think because I've always been able to create a safe pause for me wherever I am, and also because I've always got savings. I haven't come near any danger point of running out of money because I've got a Patreon and people support me financially. So I've always been able to maintain myself wherever I am in that pause as well. And so when it's come to this question of, right, what's more important? Is it more important to go home, or is it more important to finish this? And the finishing this always trumps it
Yeah, and
so far.
I've seen your struggle on this. I've seen you post about this on Instagram and in Patreon and on your blog, right?
Yeah,
Of the isolation and then getting to the Camino de Santiago and really hoping that you were going to connect with a lot of people there. And you're sitting right now in an auberge completely for yourself. There's nobody on the trail right now, right? And we do have
yeah,
to be careful. I mean, there is this sense of community responsibility. Is it safe to travel? But
absolutely.
when you're on this long journey and you have no home to go back to, and you are by yourself, I mean, you're
Yeah.
not an immediate threat to people. Um,
It's been a constant balancing of ethical decisions and questioning of whether I'm doing the right thing by continuing to walk, or and bringing in all these senses of the ethics of your own behavior and the safety, and how much am I mixing with other people. I may be a traveler, but I'm not necessarily going into people's houses. All that's kind of stopped. The last time I was in, I was in the Balkans in summer 2019, and that was a real time of loads of hospitality, and people see you and they call you over and they say, oh, what are you doing? Do you want a coffee? Come here. And they're so interested and they're curious, because there aren't really very many tourists. And so all that has completely changed, partly as I've gone into Western Europe, where perhaps people are more used to tourists and you're not a novelty anymore. And also perhaps people are a little more protectionist as well of their lifestyles. And then the pandemic as well. So everybody's completely,
See you later. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's very, very reduced, not reduced, but retreated. Everybody's retreated from each other. And so my experience of that as a traveler, like, it's really sad, because I can't connect with people as easily as I can't connect with strangers as easily as I could. But also, in a safety point of view, that's what makes it okay for me to keep traveling, because it's okay for me to just walk through a village and not stop and just wave at people and maybe have a conversation where we're all behind masks. And so it's perhaps not as ethically dubious as it might be judged on first glance, to kind of keep traveling. So yeah, there's a lot to it. And I just have to keep in constant kind of assessment, basically, about whether this is a good idea or not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's, when we were doing our walk, somebody told us, good luck in all the small and big decisions you have to make every day. And it's
yeah,
turned out to really be one of the truest things. You don't realize when you're carrying your whole home on your back, the 100 little things that have to sort of come together to keep the walk moving, right?
yeah,
And then for us too, the hospitality part, it was always something we were really surprised by, right? The generosity of people and come in for a coffee. Oh, you need a place to sleep? Yeah, like stay here, it's
yeah,
okay. And then the willingness to go inside to somebody's house to participate in that connection, right?
yeah,
And now the retreating of social, and social distancing, literally, like you keep your distance, I keep mine, we'll
yeah,
be healthy. Like I think it must change the walk. So, what are you learning as your whole walk is moved from the focus of, yeah, we're gonna walk this, the focus is still there, but all of not only the weather and the food and the showering and the sleeping and the everything else you got to deal with. Now you got to deal with, oh, is this town ahead closed? Am I a municipal? I know Spain is doing municipal lockdowns and provincial
yeah,
lockdowns and can I go to this village tomorrow? Is it how? What are you learning about fierceness at the moment? What does that feel like for you?
At the moment, I'm not sure I feel very fierce. And I think because there's been a year of pandemic, and I just think I feel very ground down by it. And so actually what I feel at the moment is very tired and vulnerable.
Mhm.
But I do think that perhaps when the experience is over, obviously I'm going to be incredibly glad that I stuck with this. You know, the success of the completion of the project is going to be everything. When I look back on this in 5 years or whatever, it's going to fill me with satisfaction. So yeah, but I guess there's a fierceness in continuing anyway, isn't there? When even if, I mean, I don't know, I just feel very stubborn, basically. I think that's a big, strong strength of character of mine, is that I just don't really, I don't consider giving up. And also, I think on a journey this size, you know, when you commit to walking 5,500 miles, or you commit to 2 years, what I thought would be 2 years on the road, it's probably even going to be almost 3 by the time I get home. That sense of project, of focus is so big that it swallows all the bad days. So if you were walking for a week and you had a bad day on day 3 and you're like, sod it, I'm not going to do this, you can't really do that. You know, in 2 years there are loads of bad days, but the idea of giving up is just impossible, because it's so big. You can't, how can one day make you give up when you're in the middle of 2 years? It's just much bigger than me, and that doesn't dwarf me, but it does just mean that I would never give it up. It's almost like it's my life itself, rather than just a thing I've decided to do. You know, it swallowed me in a way. I can't give it up, because that would be like giving up, you know, breathing or something.
I feel it. I feel it, and I think it's really hard to put words around this when you're in the middle of a really big project like this, whether it's walking across, continents, or cycling, or kayaking, whatever it is. I think there is this sense of freedom that comes with it that is so powerful that you can't really express it. But it is
Mm,
also really, you have to be stubborn.
yeah,
You have to be resilient. It is not, Louise, my partner, always says, one of the toughest things, besides traveling, we traveled with each other, walking with another person can be difficult because you're always in a different state of discomfort. But he always said, what it takes is this, like, more than the physical stuff, you
absolutely.
need to have mental strength to
Yeah,
move through a walk like this. And like you were
yeah,
talking, the commitment to say, this is not just about getting to the finish line. This is about an everyday commitment to keep showing up to a
yeah,
project. And I think it's important, to remember, with COVID right now, so many people are in so many different states of mind, right? And maybe thinking about projects like this, like, okay, so, screw it. If I don't have a job, my bar in where I worked closed down, I'm gonna run off to, I'm not gonna run off, but I'm gonna deliberately choose a different path.
yeah.
How do you choose a
There's
different path? You know?
there's the potential for freedom
Mhm.
if you choose it. You know, if you and I think you know, when all your other options are gone, like, why not? I met this guy in I was stopped in an albergue in Astorga a few weeks ago, and the guy who was running it was a volunteer from Seville, and he was a mountain guide. And he said he hadn't worked in over a year, and the Spanish government give a small amount of support to the self-employed. And he was like, well, I've given up my house because I couldn't afford the rent on my place anymore, and I've bought a van, so I'm living in my van. And I had the opportunity to volunteer here, so I did. And he gets a small amount of money for food every month, and he is keeping the albergue open. And he was totally fine with it, because there was this sense of like, well, what else am I going to do? You know, everything's screwed at the moment. There's no work anywhere. I might as well just sit here. You know, I might as well help run this hostel for free, for voluntary, and just sit here and have, you know, a warm building to sleep in, and let's not worry about the future. And I think if you can give into it, there's a real freedom in that, in the privation and especially for walking. I think for me, the most important skill for me to have come into this walk with is spontaneity, and the ability to just deal with whatever happens and know that you're going to be okay, and not to restrict it in advance because you're scared of what might happen. But you know, it's the most terrifying and the most liberating thing to walk to the edge of a city with a rucksack, with everything that you think you're going to need, like, let's say, tent, sleeping bag, bit of food, whatever, and just to go, I'm going to walk away from this city in a straight line, and I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight, tomorrow night. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know who I'm going to meet, and let's go. And that's just absolutely liberating. Because it's the dropping of everything. It's the dropping of supports. I kind of think of them as crutches, you know? It's the dropping of crutches of, oh, I have a reservation here, blah, blah, blah. Or like, you know, where's the nearest shop? And you're just going to walk, and you're going to trust that you have enough food, and you know how to find more. You have enough water for the next 4 hours, and in that 4 hours you're going to find more water. And if you don't, you're only going to suffer a little bit. You're not going to die immediately on hour 5, you know. And I think people think of this kind of, this sense of danger as being this immediate danger of it's going to kill you straight away, and it's not. You're just going to suffer until you can get more water. You won't die for about 4 days, and you'll definitely find water within 4 days, you know, because
Because
you're
you're
in
following,
Ukraine.
right? You're following, you know, a road, a village, a river, you know, a truck.
Exactly.
You know, there might be somebody on the road. They'll give you water. There'll be a fountain.
Yeah. And you have to trust. You have to trust in that. You have to trust that you're going to be okay. And so, yeah, that spontaneity of it, I think, is the biggest skill that you can have. Not to try and control it, you know. So I guess that stood me in good stead during the pandemic as well, in just, right, it's all getting a bit hot in here, let's find a place to stay, you know, that kind of thing.
Here you are at this moment. Yeah, you can only do
Yeah,
the best you can do in the moment that you're in. You take the
yeah,
very next step, right? It's a constantly learning, and I find that lesson keeps coming up over and over again for me too. Like I still haven't learned it yet. Like, and I think it's important to say, like, you don't need to go on a 5,000-mile walk, or you know, whatever we did, almost 10,000 miles. Like, you don't need to go on that kind of journey to discover this. It's just starting to let some of this fall away and say, okay, you know, trust the step you're in, take the next one, know it, do what you can on the ground, make the best choice you can, and take responsibility for the choice. Right? I think that's the lesson here that keeps. And for people like us, a walk, it takes a long walk for us to to fall into that kind of learning and knowing, right? But it's something that will stay with you forever, right? You'll know this when you go back to whatever life you're going to create after this walk. Do you have any sense of that yet, or Any sense of
No. It's surprised me a lot on this walk how lonely I've been, because that's really not something I've ever experienced in the past. You know, I've just always been fine, like I'll go off and do this thing on my own and not think about it. And this time, because I was I can't think how old I was 38 when I set off, and I'm just about to turn 41. And I think maybe it's an age thing, you know, there's this kind of sense of like, gosh, it's a really long time without people that I care about around me, you know, and so I felt that. I'm really surprised that I felt that, but also obviously that has been a really hard thing to experience, but it just shows me that perhaps I'm not a person who is going to continue journeying forever. Whereas 5 years ago, I might have, you know, I might have defined myself that way. But I think that at the moment, I'm just not putting anything on after the walk. I'm just going to get back. I know I'm going to write another book. So I'll do my best to make that happen, you know, in Wales. And after that, I just really don't know, because the book's going to take another year or so, you know, it could take 2 years. It's a lot of space and time for other things to happen. Yeah.
well, but I think, and I'm sure the pandemic has made this. I think it's what we're all craving now too is a sense of belonging. Like you're out in the walk and that belongs to you and that feels like your thing and the thing, that you're honoring in yourself. But I do think there's been this sort of wow, like what communities do I belong to? What village do I belong to?
Yeah.
And this, I felt it last year strongly of a lot of people that I hadn't been in touch with for a long time reaching out and me reaching out to them and reconnecting. And okay, yeah, we're all in this, we're all in the same storm together, not in the same boat, but are you doing okay? Yeah, you belong to me. I want to make sure you're okay. And I could sense that when you're in a walk like this, when that falls away, because if you can go village to village and say, come in for coffee, for that moment, you belong to that person, right? You belong to that village, and
Yeah.
you feel connected. But when that doesn't happen, and you need to dig even deeper, and say, I am committed to this. And
Yeah.
it,
And I just feel it was really strange that I experienced such kind of personal loneliness and disassociation from connection, you know, as I've walked through Eastern Europe. And then it happened to the whole world as well. It's like we've all had this kind of global loneliness and disconnect. And I think we've all had to examine what we need from our relationships. And I was kind of doing that anyway. And then it's just even more so, you know, but in a way, it's kind of nice. It's kind of reassuring, like to know that everybody's going through the same thing for me has been reassuring in a sense. Like, you know, to be alone at Christmas and to know that everybody else is suffering somehow. Yeah, because at the start it was just, you know, that thing where you can go, well, it's just me having a hard time and nobody else is, because they're all happy with their families and lives, and here's me trudging across Romania, you know, in the snow and whatever. But then a year or two later and it's kind of like, well, everybody's struggling. And it's saying it's helped kind of isn't the right way to phrase it, but it's just it's part of the story to go to have this, to be having this very solitary experience, and then suddenly for the whole world to have a very solitary traumatic experience is just, it's very strange.
yeah,
And it's almost like you know, you were kind of saying about how do you feel about the pandemic and what's happening for you, and I almost can't analyze it yet because I'm still living the story. And it won't be until I go home and I stop walking and I stop journeying that I'll be able to get some distance from this experience and look back and analyze it properly and write it as part of the story of what's happened to me and what's happened to everybody over the last 2 years or year.
Yeah, it is extraordinary, right? And to come with it with this perspective of I've been through this, now the world's going through it, and now in some magical way we all need to find a way forward from it and the healing from it, right? There is and maybe going back to normal isn't exactly the right wish. Like maybe it is time to pick up your rucksack and do that trip before you're too old and broken,
Yeah.
or maybe while you're old and broken, or whatever it is, like whatever that impulse is, like maybe it is now time to consider this. But where do you think we go from here? Like, how do you see people, what's your wish for people as they wake up to this sort of reality?
Um, it's actually, from an ecological point of view, it's less traveling. It's less. We need to go back to once in a lifetime journeys, because they've kind of become once a year journeys, in that sense of, especially because I'm on the Camino at the moment, and there are lots, it's quite popular in America for people to come over and do the Camino, and I don't know, we need to lose the sense of accessibility of the planet, because, and I just think that if because you're doing it, when I'm doing a journey on foot, I kind of hate the idea of just flitting to places, that feels so alien to me. And it was so weird when I was in Italy a year ago during the beginning of the pandemic to understand how many people were just crisscrossing the globe. There's this complete shock at all the flights coming back and forth between China and Europe, and this was what was spreading the virus at that time, and the whole world just went across the world because of all these flights, and everybody was flying all the time. And what I'd like to see, I don't know if it will happen, because it needs people to not want to go back to normal, like you're saying, because normal is this incredibly high consumption, luxury is normal capitalist society. But I'd like us not to fly, and I'd like us not to think about the journeys that we can make through human power that we appreciate more. So you can come from America to Europe and walk the Camino, but you're going to think about how you can get there not by flying. And you can't take a month. You can't take a month off and come to Europe. You've got to take a year. And that's what it's going to have to be. And I'd really wish that people would have that more, but actually, it's possible that the opposite is going to happen, because everybody's suddenly going to go, oh my goodness, where can I escape to? And we've all been so trapped in our homes, and let's go and do all the things that we've been dreaming of. So, and of course I appreciate that that's a really great thing that people need, but the change that I want to happen is more human powered journeys.
Human powered journeys. You say it and I'm like, oh, yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
You don't have to run a marathon, you don't have to walk for 2 years or 3 years, but make it feel like a once in a lifetime journey so that you can really deeply appreciate people that you're meeting, places that you're in, nature that you're encountering. And for us, one of the most shocking things all the time was just seeing the piles of trash everywhere, right? And for us, this was really heartbreaking. It was like, wow, look at how much we consume, all of us on this planet all the time. What can we do to control our own consumption, right? This grasping for, yeah, okay, the flight is $50 and I can fly, anywhere I want in Europe for 20 euros or something. Like, is that really a good thing for all of us? Is that
I
really
don't
the
think
experience?
anybody should ever be flying across land, across Europe. Nobody should have to fly from Vienna to London. Take a bus.
Yeah.
It's
See
longer, it's
see what's
slower, it's less comfortable, but nobody should be nobody should be taking these stupid flights from like Barcelona to Berlin or whatever. Just, it's not right. It's not right. Yeah.
And I feel like there's something that comes with putting your feet on the planet in this long walk
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
makes you really see what we're doing, you know,
Yeah. And
see.
appreciate the size of it as well. I think, you know, because I have flown in the past, I don't fly anymore. I've taken one flight to Mexico in the last 10 years. And it was just so weird to be transported somewhere without this appreciation. I think when you travel on foot, most specifically, you get an appreciation of the size of the land that we're crossing. And when you just cross it in a heartbeat, you diminish it. You start to think that you, this stupid little human, are more equal in size to the globe. And we're just not, you know. And yeah, so it really gives you a different sense of land and the size of the land and the complexity of the land that we live on.
Yeah. And we have lost that in a sense. I felt that really strongly on our own walk. Like when you said before, like my radius when you're walking, yeah, it's like 20 miles and maybe 50 miles. Like, okay,
Yeah,
100 miles would be 3 days from now. You know, like
yeah,
we're not getting there in an hour. Like that's okay.
yeah. And then
Thank
people get
you
in
for
their bloody cars and they just
right.
snip it.
And we heard
Because,
this all the time, like, you know, people inviting us into their cars because they couldn't believe we were walking. And then, but we would ask people like, "Oh, how far away is it?" And they're like, they have no sense of distance, right? They're
mm,
like, I don't
mm,
know, it's like 5 minutes by car.
yeah,
Like, oh, okay, so that's probably about 4 hours for us. It's 5 minutes by car. It's probably 10 or
mm,
15 miles. Maybe it's 3 hours. Right? Like the whole concept. Nobody. We met very, very few people who could know the distance between their villages by the
mm.
actual distance. They just didn't know. They just didn't walk it. They hadn't tried. They never would have thought of it, right? And
Yeah,
it's
people quite often give you wrong answers, don't they? It's funny.
we learned very early in Thailand to not trust that because suddenly we were thinking, oh well, if it's only like 10 miles or 15 kilometers, and it's actually 40, and you're like, oh, that's quite a difference.
Yeah,
Yeah, just getting to know yourself through getting to know the planet, I think, is an important connection.
yeah.
Well, Ursula, tell people, do you have anything else that I missed that you'd like to share?
No, I don't think so.
No.
No.
Tell people where they can find your website and your Instagram, and then we'll talk about a great thing that you're going to offer.
So yeah, I go by the name One Woman Walks on most things. So my website is onewomanwalks.com, and then I have the same name on Facebook and Instagram. And I'm kind of blogging every few weeks. Sometimes it goes onto my website, and then also I keep a Patreon blog. So also on Patreon is One Woman Walks, and that's where people can support me through donations. And I also put a lot of blogs and writing on there.
Yeah,
But I'm always posting photos and different things on Instagram as well.
yeah. It's been fun to follow your journey and
Mhm.
see how this is all unfolding. And we it's okay to mention here, like there are other walkers out in the world. Like there is a community of people doing this, and
Yeah,
we
yeah,
found each other simply because of, I think you found me first, and
yeah. I've always been looking for other people who are doing the same thing and just to see how their journey is. And I tried to meet quite a few different people. As I was lucky enough to meet 3 different journey makers, 3 different walks with 4 people. As I was coming west, they were all coming east, and so we
right.
crossed with 3 different journeys, and that was just brilliant to go and spend a little bit of time, um, a few days with each person,
Yeah.
and just get to know them and just think about their. It was a surprise because they were all so different actually, and just to learn about who they are and what their motivations are was just really, really fascinating for me. So yeah.
Yeah, I missed that. We were a little bit further west. I think we were already in France when you
That's
were
right.
sort of still in Romania or Bulgaria, wherever
Uh-huh.
you started off. Like you were, we were a little
Yeah,
further west from you at that point
that's
when
right.
we started. And I'm glad we were able to connect here. And
Yeah.
I
Well,
want to
hopefully we'll
mention,
talk again
oh,
together in future.
I hope so. Yeah, I really want to catch you on part of this
Yeah,
last
I really like that.
bring back up to the UK somehow.
Yeah.
You know, and this that North Spain area is sort of intriguing to me.
Yeah.
I've
I
been
hope
thinking
so.
like, oh, that's the kind of traveling I want to do. Like, I want to go somewhere where I could just walk like for a week, you know,
Uh-huh.
nature somewhere, or just I miss that, and I miss being out in the world in a way that is so uncomfortable sometimes, but so exhilarating. Right? It's
Mm-hmm.
such
Mm-hmm.
nobody can ever take that away from you once you've walked, you know, for some distance. You know, and when you start thinking, oh, 400 miles, oh, that's like you could do that in a month. Like
Yeah.
you start thinking, how many hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles can you walk?
Mm. It really opens your possibilities, doesn't it? Of once you show yourself what you can do, you're just like, yeah, it just takes time and discomfort, and then you can achieve it, isn't it? And that's a really strong thing to realize about yourself, and freeing as well. It's very freeing to know if you have an idea that you can put your mind towards it and then achieve it, just step by step by step by step. And each step isn't necessarily pain free or comfortable, or sometimes it's uncomfortable and it's painful, and but always at the same time accompanying the pain and the discomfort is, I mean, exhilaration is a word that I use a lot, because the absolute, like, just spirit freedom of living like this is completely incomparable to normal life, isn't it? Just seeing a view and just being completely in it. You're not going back home in an hour, so you better enjoy it while you can. You're like completely part of it, and it's wonderful, completely wonderful.
Yeah, we always called it like a sensory, like it's a real sensory experience, right? Because you begin to tune in to real subtle things around you. Like you know the sound of a truck is different than the sound of a car, or the sound of this bird, and the sound of in the middle of the night when the crickets stop and the frogs start and the birds start in the
Yeah,
early morning. There's a real subtle connection. Um,
yeah, things have more meaning. The connection to what nature is happening around you is more meaningful because you're part of it. Excuse me.
yeah. Well, we wish that for all of you. And before we go, I'm going to mention that we have a very special gift from Ursula, who is on the road. So what she's willing to do, and if Ursula and her walk resonated with you, first, please consider supporting her on Patreon. Patreon. This she is carrying on with this journey with the love and support of a bigger community and carrying that forward. So her Patreon page, if you go to her website, onewomanwalks.com, you'll find the information there and you can see some of her blogs. But you're doing postcards for
Yeah,
for folks, right? We're gonna
yeah.
do so 20 participants attending today's session. If you mention that you heard Ursula speak on the Fierce Awakened Woman Summit, you'll get a personal postcard from her. It'll be a random drawing of 20 people. You send her a message. And you can message her on Instagram at One Woman Walks or email her at onewomanwalkswells@gmail.com. So One Woman Walks on Instagram, or the email is onewomanwalkswells@gmail.com. So I want to just mention that this is a really generous offer, and it's like, oh, you could just send a postcard from anywhere. But when you're in a walk like this, the task of finding postcards, finding an open post office, writing notes in your tent or at a cafe, carrying them to the next village, hoping that the post office is open, it really becomes a labor of love to connect with people in this way and not just throw a photo up on Instagram. This is a real personal commitment to do that. And it is really sort of an ultimate core message around this summit, right? Where this is a bit of a sisterhood connection where we're connecting fierceness with footsteps and supporting Ursula so she can bring her gifts to the world, which right now is walking across Europe and connecting all this energy that she's carrying within her and through the villages that she's walking to. And then as she's walking, sending back those vibrations to you so that you feel connected to her walk in a way that brings your gifts forward of just saying, yeah, I support this woman. So I really want to thank you for this gesture. I think it's really lovely. And we'll explain a little bit more of that. That will be on the speaker page of how you can participate in this. But it will be sort of just random, right? You'll just pick 20
Yeah,
people per message and see where it goes. But
that's right.
thanks, Ursula. I'm looking forward to seeing where you go next. And I hope you can keep moving forward in
Yeah,
a steady stream of footsteps.
yeah, me too. the next the next big marker, I mean, I'm just poised on the edge of Galicia and then entering, and I'm about 150 miles away from Santiago de Compostela, which is the end of the Camino. And then more meaningfully for me is Finisterre. So to really to walk to the end of the world, you know, and to have walked from the Ukraine all the way to the sea, to the Atlantic Ocean, is going to just be this massive, massive achievement for me. And then once I can do that, I'll just be walking home, you know. So I'm willing to wait this out, you know, because the prize is so important to really get to the end of the world, to finish there. That's just going to be really great. It's going to just feel so brilliant.
In the sense of achievement and determination
Absolutely.
and accomplishment, like nobody could ever steal that from you. Like that is
Yeah,
yours and earned with sweat and discomfort and commitment
yeah,
and and patience and resilience. Like this is the essence of who we are, right? Showing up in the world in this way and
absolutely.
and fighting for your own thing that you really can't even explain to anybody else. Like
Hmm.
it's hard to put words around
Completely.
the journey. Thank you for being an
Yeah.
inspiration for all of us, Ursula.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to do this. I really enjoyed talking to you.